outside of the household daycare, meaning that your children are being essentially raised and watched by potentially strangers. What impact is that having on society? And just as importantly, what impact is the work world having on families and the demands that it makes of individuals? And what impact are things like divorce and other social problems feeding back into the workforce? And even though that these two institutions share a lot in common, many times when you share things, goals in common, you come in conflict over scarce resources, particularly things like time and attention, energy, your personality. As far as corporations are concerned, this is what they want out of you. Listen to this. This is on page 19 of the introduction, which is XIX. Wait a minute. Yeah. It says right here, actually starting at the beginning, the bottom of page 18 in the introduction, please bring your books to class. I told you guys about that stuff. That's points off each time you don't do it. And please have it out with you. With the advent of the new economy, the question is, if anything, more important now than when I wrote this book, since 1997, a new term, zero drag, has begun quietly circulating in Silicon Valley, the heartland of the computer revolution in America. Originally it meant the frictionless movement of a physical object, like a skate or bicycle. Then it was applied to employees who, regardless of the financial incentives, easily gave up one job for another. Meaning that the words zero drag are a way to describe an ideal employee. That you're not going to make unnecessary demands on the company. That you're not going to harm the efficiency of the company by wanting time off because you have kids or because you have other family obligations. I love filming these classes. That way everybody comes in late. I got it on camera. So anyway, please stop coming in on late, especially those of you who have your books down. 2 o'clock, be in your chair ready to go, please. Seriously. Okay? You guys, some of you have already lost 10 or 15 points. Anyway. More recently, it has come to mean unattached or unobligated. A .com employer might comment approvingly of an employee, he's zero drag, meaning that he's available to take on extra assignments. You notice the pronoun he. Respond to emergency calls or relocate anytime. According to Poe Bronson, a researcher of Silicon Valley culture, zero drag is optimal. For a while, new applicants would jokingly be asked about their drag coefficient, since the job is a full hour's commute from San Francisco. An apartment in the city was a full unit of drag. A spouse, drag coefficient of 1. Kids, a half point per. Which, if you know anything, is an absurd statement that a child would be less of a drag on you than a spouse. Spouses don't need to have their diapers changed or have their clothes cleaned for them and a whole bunch of other stuff that you have to do for children. And one of the issues here, if this is, and most employers consider children to be a bigger issue than a marriage or a commute. In a society that claims to be family-friendly, and many businesses that claim to be family-friendly, the way Amerco does, which we'll see, Amerco actually says that they're family-friendly for a couple reasons. One, to better their image as far as their customers or employees are concerned, and also to comply with government regulations so that they look like good employers. But the other issue is, in America, about 95% of people say they're going to get married. And roughly about the same percentage of people, thank God this doesn't come to truth and reality, say that they want to have children. You should ask yourself why that assumption is so high. If the idea of getting married and having kids was compared to an original idea, or if it was the idea of creativity or being unique, there would be nothing unique on this planet. Meaning that it's been done already. Marriage, family. You should ask yourself why the United States and why other societies put so much value on this act. Conflict theorists would suggest that there's a couple things. family people or people who are oriented towards their family are usually much more into social order and less into things like chaos and anarchy and trying to overthrow the government. So there's number one reason. Number two, they tend to not complain as much about paying taxes for schools. Okay? Number three, people, when you get married and you have children, you're going to have to, many people have to buy a house. Or you have to buy new things or pay for the wedding or on and on. I mean, getting involved in a family is probably the biggest kind of expense you could imagine. You could take 20 trips to Europe. You could take 3 years off of work for what you're going to pay to start a family. It's one of the issues. Remember, in the book, what kind of a culture, and we'll talk about the connections, just people like to spend time with their family. Family takes a lot of time and money. What kind of a culture is at Amerco? What do they value most of all? And what do they judge their employees upon? You have to give this at work. What is it? It's not blood and tears, that's for certain. What is it? Time. Part of it is because I think employees, especially ones that are getting paid overtime, they have all these obligations. Their idea of being family-friendly workplace is that you let me make as much money as possible so I can make my family happy. Let alone forget the fact that I'm neglecting them for 12 hours a day. And if you actually read further into what Arlie Hopechild's saying, and just leave it there, please. What Arlie Hopechild's further saying is that not only do people say that they're working and that it's part of their family duty, even though that many of them don't want to admit this or try and claim, and we'll see at the end of chapter 3, there's a little survey there that claim they want to spend more time with their family, given the chance they don't. That family has become a worse place to be for many of these employees than work. At work you get paid. At work you get complimented. At work when things go wrong, other people are responsible for helping you out. It's hard to get fired from work. Generally, your employees don't say, I hate you, you ruined my life, Mom. You know when you're doing something right or wrong at work, you get immediate feedback. You don't know what you're doing with kids. You might think you're heading the right path, and then when they turn 19, they turn into a heroin addict and they shoot 12 people at the mall. Or turn into Hitler. All right, Hitler had parents. He was a kid at one point. So did Stalin. So did Charles Manson. The problem is, family is is more up in the air as far as what the results are. And on top of it, let's take housework. It's demeaning work. Telling me that people in this classroom love to dust and vacuum. Okay? That's why frat houses are such a massive amounts of mess and clutter. Because nobody wants to be responsible for cleaning a house. And unless they designate one person, it turns into a madhouse. I've seen it in my own eyes, so don't try to say or deny. Maybe your frat house ain't like this, but most of them are. That's why playing beer pong in a frat house where the ball hits the floor and all you're doing is washing off with water is probably the quickest way to get sick in the world. I don't get mono. I ain't never got mono. One of the quickest ways you can get mono is beer pong. I'm telling you right now. Think I'm joking? Look it up online. Okay? So one of the issues here is, are people really, do they really want to spend time with their family? Or do they really just want to spend time at work? And what the bigger issue is what impact is all the turmoil supposedly about divorce and growing up in a single family household or growing up in poverty, what impact is that having on why people spend a lot of time at work? And just as importantly, is all this time that people are spending at work making it more likely that they're going to get divorced or that their children are going to have some of these other issues like feelings of abuse or neglect or alienation. So let me read the rest of this and then we'll move to what the book has to say about divorce where we left off last time, and then I'll explain this chart a little bit here, and then I'll give you some examples of corporate culture, of the viciousness and the demands that corporate culture makes on individuals and also on society, but also why people choose to do these things, because you do get rewarded. And then next time on Wednesday, we will break each institution down in a little more detail. Remember that chart I showed you last time with all the institutions and their functions and ideology and power structure. We'll talk more specifically about what the work world and the economic world want from individuals and from society, and what they give to individuals and society, and what they conflict over and what they have shared values over. I mean, clearly one of the shared values that economic institutions and family institutions have is stability, social stability. How you get that? They view that a little bit differently. However, families are not interested in high levels of profit. Maybe income, but not profit. You don't run your family like a business. You don't say, you know what, Jenny, you keep being inefficient when you take out the trash. I'm hiring an outside consultant from China. You don't have a family meeting and go, you know what, profits are down 44% this week, so nobody take a hot shower for the rest of the week. Now, it's different. You might want to cut costs. So some people, I'll tell you right now, some people do run their families like a business. Or at least some aspects of it. Families don't. Although, again, remember we've talked about the intersection. Some businesses are family owned. So there is a lot of intersection point. The things they compete the most of are things that are scarce. Particularly time and attention and energy. These types of things. Which, if you look at it from a fundamental perspective, there's 24 hours in the day. You sleep 6 to 8 hours. That gives you 16 to 18 hours during the day to get what you need done. If you're at work for 12 hours and you're commuting for another 2 hours, that's 14 hours. You've got another 4 hours. You get an hour at lunch. Now you're down to 3 hours. If you want 8 hours of sleep, you're only down to 1 left. Okay, and I can tell you right now, most of these people aren't getting 8 hours of sleep. And I'll tell you right now, you ask any doctor in this world worth their salt, they'll tell you that the one thing that'll age you quicker than anything, it ain't drugs and alcohol. It's a lack of sleep and irregular sleep patterns. Look at you know why presidents age the way they do? Seen Obama? It's getting gray. Go look at pictures of Bill Clinton before he took office and then after he left office. All right? Bush too. He looked 100 million years old. I was expecting him to turn into a fossilized, petrified human being right in front of me. He looked horrendous. He's only 60-some years old, 60 years old. Okay. Suzanne Summers older than him. Looks a lot better too. Probably would have made a better president. Anyway, got more experience. So to go back though. Remember they talk about half-pointed drag for each kid. We wonder why a child only gets a half point. What assumptions underlie this calculation? Imagining the perfect zero drag worker, we might envision a young, single, childless male, not a woman, wanting to make good in a first or second job, or dedicate their whole life. One of the little tricks, here's Gary's tip for the day on the job interview. If they ask you something like, where do you see yourself in 10 years? Unless try not to defend the guy. Go, I'm going to be at this company, a loyal employee. I'm going to move my way up. And if you get promoted, I'll probably have your job. So that's how much I want to be a part of this organization. Because if you tell them, maybe 8, 9 months till I get bored. You're not going to get the job. Most of you already know this stuff. I'm not telling you anything new. Again, it's like a first date. You don't go, you know what, I have a serious anger management problem, and it probably won't come out until the 5th date. But when it does, you better call the police, because I'm probably break some windows and knock some tables down, If you've ever seen Punch Drunk Love, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Where he trashes the bathroom in the middle of the day, anyway. Then tries to lie about it. Maybe a sister takes his mother to the doctor, and his mother, when she's well, looks after his grandparents. Perhaps a term calls to mind a 40-year-old man married to a homemaker who assumes full responsibilities for the young children and elderly parents. I've seen interviews with people who work at companies like Enron that are obsessed with the amount of time. They hire maids, not because they can afford it, because they have no time to clean their house. They eat junky diets because they can only afford to go eat at many of them don't get high salaries. They have to go eat at fast food restaurants because they don't have time to cook. They don't have time for social lives. On the weekends, if they even get a full weekend off, they have to basically sleep all day and rest. You can't move. This is not... it reminds me of the Matrix. Like, you know how the Matrix was using human beings as batteries? That's the way the corporate world looks at you. Not only as an employee, I love this. They get you when you're outside of work as consumers. They want to suck you dry there, too. They want... As an employee, they want all your time and loyalty. As a consumer, they want everybody your money. They want your time, too. They want you sitting in the movie theater watching a movie that really is a commercial for Chevys or something, like Transformers was, because Bumblebee is not a damn Camaro. And most of you don't even know what Bumblebee. Can you guess by his name, Bumblebee, what kind of a car Bumblebee really was? Yeah, a Volkswagen Bug. Which I can understand why they changed it, since Volkswagen was founded by Hitler, and the Volkswagen Bug was actually designed personally by Hitler. And it's so funny because it's like it's become synonymous with like hippie sort of thing, and especially the Volkswagen van. And it's like hippies are about as far as you can get from Nazis. And for them to drive around in a car that was designed by Hitler, I mean, it just speaks to the fact that either A, they don't know the history, or B, just don't care, or C, or sort of going, yeah, look now, Hitler, where your van's being used for to spread liberal ideas all over the world. Okay, let me blow some smoke in your face, diffuser. Maybe you like that. Maybe it'll calm you down. But of course, a far wider range of people are coming to work these days. 45% of them are women, and have a lot of drag right if they're mothers. And the majority of women workers are mothers. Today, 74% of mothers with children 6 to 17, 59% with children 6 and under, and listen to this one. This rarely ever happened in the 1950s. 55, unless you were absolutely poor, 55% of women with children 1 and under are in paid work. About half of them full-time. Okay? 55% of working women now earn about half or more of the family income. 18% of those provide it all. These are older statistics, but they're still somewhat accurate. 11%, more than half, although the numbers have probably gotten worse. And the rest roughly half. For their part, most married men have working wives with whom they share or try to share or think they should try to share. I love that one. Think they should try. I'm thinking about trying while I'm laying on the couch. Get up and help me back in the room. Oh, you know I should do that, but I feel good enough just thinking I should do that. It's a stand-up comedy routine waiting to happen, isn't it? Where are you at, Tim Allen? Doing more coke? Anyway. You know he was in jail. He sold it. He wasn't just doing it. He was selling. He was destroying other people's lives for profit. Here you go. 12-year-old kid, take some coke from Tim Allen. Go get some heroin from Bruce Willis. Anyway. Don't ask me what Angelina Jolie was selling. Anyway. About half of all workers are or will soon be directly responsible for children under age 18 or for disabled or frail or elderly relatives. And this doesn't include a dear friend home with from the hospital or the high school classmate down on his luck for whom a person finds herself on call. So really, who is zero drag? Very few are, I think. Yet for some employers, the phrase connotes their ideal employee as a term. Zero drag never come up in interviews I did over 3 summers. And Aramco, a Fortune 500 company far from Silicon Valley, but as an idea, the unencumbered employee was an ever-present theme. Let's take 2 seemingly unrelated statistics and try and understand if these 2 things are related. One thing that has happened in the development of the family is in the United States, much more traditional forms of the family existed up until probably the age of the urban world in the United States, early 1900s. And the traditional family was what? Say it. Is your name Josh? Go ahead, tell me, Josh.
Mother, father, children.
Actually, that's more the modern family. That's what we call the nuclear family, which I love that word. Because nuclear bombs are used to destroy entire cities. And also they irradiate, even for energy, it can irradiate areas. Go ask Japan what they think about nuclear radiation. Yes?
There used to be more extended families.
Right, so you had people, if there were elderly people and they needed health care, were there people around to take care of these people? Many times, did women work most of the time, or at least work outside the home? Not generally. So there were, and children were either raised by grandparents or aunts and uncles when the parents were at work, or their parents when they came home. And even though the book says that modern kids or modern families spend more time with their kids now, kids also spend less time with extended family and are more likely to go to daycare. So kids go to daycare a lot of the time, and elderly people go to homes. Does that happen in most other countries around the world? No. That's actually, if you send your parent, elderly parent, especially with a health problem, to a nursing home, you are looked upon like in a shameful manner. You go do this in Japan. People say, what did your parents do to deserve this type of mistreatment? Right? Even in parts of Europe, you don't dare do this kind of stuff. You know, and especially around the world. Now, part of it is because it's expensive, and I assure you there's people in Kenya who would like to send their annoying father-in-law to the nursing home to get him out of the house because all he does is complain about everything, and it's hot in here. It's like, look, it's Kenya. I don't even think there's parts of Kenya you can't even plug something in. So how are you going to get an air conditioner, you know? Anyway, and also, so in the United States, though, people send their kids to daycare and they send their grandparents to nursing homes and other adult homes. And some adult homes are quite nice, and nursing homes are quite nice, and actually some elderly people love to be around people their own age. Many times they meet other people. But is that trend towards, and they've done a study that said that most elderly people receive 1 visit per month from their family. Can we blame part of that on what's going on here with Amerco and this workaholic stuff? Let me put it another way. The company thinks there are positives to workaholism. People give me some negatives to workaholism, and then we'll talk about divorce and daycare and other stuff like that. What are some negatives to workaholism? Yes, tell me your name.
Joe.
Go ahead, Joe.
Stress.
So stress is a big point, and stress is actually a culprit in two of the number 1 and number 2 killers in the United States. What are they? Heart disease is one of them, which is it can not only be caused by stress, but heart attacks and strokes can be triggered by intense stress. Okay, I actually heard an article about the times you're most likely to have a stress or to have an aneurysm or something. It was really weird. One of them was after going to the bathroom, and the other one was having sex, and the other one was waking up in the morning for some reason. So, but again, and it's kind of funny that more people don't have heart attacks at work. But again, there was actually an incident, I don't know if some of you remember this, a few years back, a person did have a heart attack while they were in class and passed away, and it was sad. You know, and for young, especially young people who don't like to think about death, and it's right in your face. Like, my mom died, but I wasn't at her bedside when she finally did die, and my sister was, because I was actually at school, believe it or not, but I can't imagine what that's like to witness that. You know, were you in the class? Or did you hear about it?
I was here, yeah.
But still, so and then cancer is the second one. It's cancer related to stress, can be at least. Some studies have shown that as well. Stress is also related to things like depression, suicide, murder, eating disorders, drug abuse, alcohol abuse. So this is serious stuff. I'll tell you right now, there are a lot of issues that the United States society and individuals and the government don't want to talk about. And I'll tell you right now, number 1 on the list is stress. Nobody wants to talk about that. Why? What would you have to do really to reduce stress in the United States? Would it be a simple fix? No. You'd have to change the way we commute to work. You'd have to change people's behavior on the road. You'd have to change people's behavior out in public. You'd have to change the demands of the work world. Right? Does Amerco do they seem to create a lot of stress around their employees? Concern, worry? Okay. What are some of the other issues with workaholism? Here's an issue that if I'm building a car and it takes me 10 hours, and I got paid for those 10 hours, and I got 2 hours of overtime, I made off, right? I made out. I made well, right? I did well. And the bosses saw me and all this other stuff. But if a German worker could make the same car for 7 hours, in 7 hours, who's better? Who in the end is the market going to reward? Yeah, and that's exactly what's going on right now. You don't see Germans drowning in $15 trillion in debt, do you? You don't see them with 10.5 or 8. It's now 8.5. Did everybody see the other day that the economy actually produced 247,000 jobs in 1 month? The market went berserk. It went up. I made some money on the market. It felt good. Okay, to watch, your stocks go up 5-6% in one day. Okay, most people, you buy bonds, you get 5 to 6% in 1 year. Okay, but again, Germany did not have a housing bubble. They did not have this ridiculous, all these layoffs. Now, one unfortunate problem for Germany, because I don't think Germany will ever give up the dream of controlling Europe. They just want to do it now financially instead of through weapons and guns. But I assure you the reason why Germany even gives a damn about Greece is that they want to shore up their position as the leader of Europe, and they want to, I think it's essentially trying to buy Greece. I mean, for as much money as they put down, they could have bought Greece by now. You know, and they're not into colonialism, but it's to the point where the only drag on their economy is having to deal with Greece and Portugal and Spain and Ireland and Italy. Interestingly enough, they call those countries the pigs. P-I-I-G-S. Portugal, Italy, Ireland, Greece, and Spain. They call them pigs. And they all owe, like, almost all of them owe more than their entire GDP. Italy is probably the big problem because it's such a big economy. It owes trillions of euros. Okay, and if you haven't checked, Italy is not exactly leading the world in making televisions and computers and even plastic junk. Italy makes virtually nothing. Think about it. What do they make? Ferraris? You know, I mean, which is nice. It's good to sell things that cost $500,000, but you can't run an economy on that. And mostly what they do is they sell agricultural products like olive oil and you know, niche products, that's Italian things that only Italians make, and then tourism. I mean, think about it. Now, Milan does have some industrial areas. They do actually make clothes and stuff, and Milan is actually a fashion center the way Paris and New York is, but still. But again, I'm telling you right now, if you went to Europeans and said, you know what? How we're going to determine your success as a worker is how many hours you put in. You know what? The Europeans would be like, what? Can I immigrate to Russia or something? Can I leave now? Because this sounds like a stupid plan to me. And it's not that Europeans are overly lazy, although the French have been accused of that. Sorry, France. It is. Okay. I mean, the French are so goofy. Their government does their laundry and takes care of their kids. And stuff. I mean, just seriously. If you've ever seen Michael Moore's movie Sicko, you know, I mean, it's ridiculous. But Europeans know this: that another dime in my hand is not worth that hour. That hour is worth. I think, because Americans are so obsessed with this financial accoutrements of success, is that I think Americans have a hard time determining how much an hour of their free time is worth. An hour of free time to many people, particularly if you look at Europeans, that's worth $10,000. That's worth even more. It's priceless on a lot of levels. Americans trade this for a nickel. Here, take it. $7.75? Do you think your time is only worth $7.75? And let me ask you something. You ain't even getting $7.75. What are you actually getting after taxes? Maybe, right? If you make that low of a wage, though, they give it most of you back. But I would say to the government, if I'm getting all my money back at the end of the year, first of all, what the hell are you doing with my money in the interim? Are you putting it in Enron stock or something? It's out of business. Putting it in Fannie and Freddie? And secondarily, now what a stupidly inefficient system that you take taxes out of my paycheck and then just give them back to me. What kind of dumb crap is that? What is it, in my own little private account or something? This is stupidity. And I think, especially at Amerco, so if people's hour free time is supposedly worth so much, why do people do this stuff? Are people materialistic? Remember that Culture article when it was written on Labor Day? What percentage of Americans said Americans were too materialistic and had their priorities out of whack and focused too much on money? What percentage, roughly? Remember the thing on the slideshow? Just take a guess. 7%. It was, yeah, around there, and it was about 80 on some of those. So workaholism not only creates an inefficient situation, stress, okay, but it also leads to negative aspects like materialism. Well, if most of the people in America think that people work too hard or too many hours or too focused on material things, how come nothing changes? How come people still go to work? Excuse me. How come people still go to work and put up with this garbage? So there's that power mechanism, remember we talked about? But again, I could make the argument that if people refuse to work 50 hours a week, wages would go up. Are Americans... Here's another thing. Who's more likely to protest when a labor law gets changed? French people or Americans?
French.
You better believe it. Every 5 minutes something happens in France. You almost think the government does things just to get people out in the street so they can sell trinkets to them or signs. Whoever's making these signs and the paint that goes on these signs, they love riots, or not riots, but protests, right? You know, keep France's labor law. And the more ridiculous the issue, the longer the sign has to be, so the more money they're going to make. So I think the government's running a sign-making business or something. Or those barricades. Or, and I'll tell you right now, you know who makes money during a riot or a protest? Who makes money during a protest? Who gets overtime during a protest? The police. So what the hell is the government? You think the police? You almost think sometimes, because there's usually very rarely do these things turn into armed conflicts. Although stuff gets thrown, no doubt about it, people get beat up. But very rarely does it turn into shooting in the streets the way it does in places like Russia sometimes or China. You almost think that the police are almost edging them on, going, hey, "Come on, man, I'll kick you back some of my overtime if you guys start a riot. Come on, just burn this car down. Do it. Flip it over. Come on." Right? Because what do they care? You know? Because if they know for the most part that it's not going to turn into a massacre in the streets, what are the police actually losing? They look good because they stopped the protests from getting violent. They made a bunch of money. And in the end, the protesters probably get what they want. In the United States, are people into collective action? Do people join unions and social movement organizations for the most part? There's a lot of reasoning for that. One of the biggest reasons is the individual nature of American culture. Is that I think Americans view each other as more competitors than French people view each other. Partly this is the diversity in the United States. There's no doubt about it that I think people look at each other from a racial and a gender perspective and a regional perspective and look at each other and say, I got to get above that person. I think also Americans put a lot of personal pressure on themselves to succeed, and so when they fail, they feel that it's their own fault and not the fault of the system, right? I would say clearly, though, that's the wrong-headed attitude when it comes to the minimum wage. That's a structural thing that can be changed. But you know what happens every time somebody wants... Who do you think comes out against an increase in the minimum wage? What reasons do you think they give? It's very clever the way they do this. Who do you think comes out against minimum wages increases? Who do you think? Who do you think? Who do you think comes out against it? Yeah, especially places like Walmart and other places that know they're going to get hit. You know what they say? You go ahead and you raise the minimum wage, and I'm going to raise prices on everything tomorrow. So it knocks it out there. Then they also say, all right, you go ahead and you raise minimum wages. No more factories are ever going to come here again. And the ones that are here are going to go to China. Then also the third strategy is to say, well, it's just going to cause inflation, and it's going to cause an even bigger problem. We'll have to raise interest rates, and it'll mess up the economy, and it could cause a recession. Fourth, it goes on further and says, hey, we're in a global competitive environment. If I have to raise minimum wage, people are going to get laid off. So I can save money. And that may all be true. But they raise, the minimum wage in European countries is significant, from a real perspective, is significantly higher than in the United States. Now, having said that, you see the debt problems they're having. But here's the thing. We have a lower minimum wage, and yet we still have a bigger debt problem than Europe does. Okay, we are the Greece of North America. The difference is we're not Greece, we're the United States, and if anybody gets all crazy with us, we just put a military uniform on and go, say that again to my face. Right? Go ask Iraq what happens when you get in the United States' face. Or even just when the United States doesn't like you. You didn't even have to do anything sometimes. What did Iraq do this last time? They didn't even invade Kuwait. Saddam Hussein must have been like, what the hell do you want from me? You took my military, you take my, well, not steal it, but you're taking my oil, you won't let me buy weapons. Remember we had this is Iraq, we had no fly zones that collapsed them down only to this little corridor and stuff. And they weren't even involved in 9/11. And Bush was in willing to teach you lesson anyway. Remember, only the United States would do something like this. Maybe Russia. Bush went on TV and gave Saddam Hussein an ultimatum to leave his own country. He said, you got 48 hours to get out. Knowing full well that Saddam wasn't going to leave, right? And then he can start the bombing. Just so, even though we do have a big debt problem, it won't probably turn out like Greece. If Greece had nuclear weapons, I don't think they would be negotiating to get default on their bonds and stuff like that. I don't think France is going to default. So, anyway, although you never know. All right, so let me finish up the piece we were reading in the book on family. This is on page 112. Trying to look for stuff in Daycare. You know what, actually, let's start on page 100. Let's start with the Daycare stuff so we can talk about that as well. Because, well, what is the connection? Why are more kids going into daycare now than before? What's the connection to the work world? Yeah, but people worked hard in the 50s. How come people didn't go to daycare then? Like, in the 1950s, there was no tutor time and kinder care, and none of this stuff. Huh? Right. Well, there was things like that because that's not really babysitting. That's like, but you're right. It's become much more prevalent. But why? What has changed? Yes, in the back.
Daycare to the job.
Huh?
They bring the daycare to the job now.
That's part of it. But again, why in the world though? If there's two parents in one household, first of all, is there? What has become more prevalent? First of all. So no matter what, and no matter how wealthy you are, you at least at the very minimum need some kind of nanny or something, or at the very minimum a babysitter, and hopefully it's a relative. Also, remember we just talked about that the nuclear family presents a problem because it's so limited. Many times people live thousands of miles from where they grew up, traditionally. Also, even in a married household, why is daycare a big issue? You can see, some of the stuff here about there's the daycare chart. Here's married. This is single. This is married couple. This is single. It says organized child care facility, 27% for single mothers. That's how many of our percentage of kids go to daycare. So even in married families, it's 23%. What has changed from the 1950s to now about who works in a household? Two-income families. That's important. Part of that also, not only do some men in the work world blame women for that. Why? They blame women for lower wages. Why? What happens when more people go into the workforce? Huh? Okay, so less. Well, you have actually maybe a better way to put it is you have. Go ahead.
They kind of make the standards a little bit lower in terms of the wages.
Right? How? Yes.
Distributing the wealth more, right? Instead of one person making 100 grand, now you have two people making 50.
All right, so you have an issue with that, but I think you guys are missing something very fundamental about supply and demand. Think about Economics 101. When you have more of something, what happens to the price of it? It goes down. So if now instead of only 80 million workers, there's 140 million workers, what's going to happen to wages naturally? This is why a lot of people are critical of illegal immigration. That what it does is creates a much larger pool of lower-waged people who are willing to do really just many times terrible jobs, like picking fruit off of trees that have been sprayed with poisonous pesticides and things like that. The cancer rate among farm workers is off the charts. You wouldn't believe it. If you've ever seen anybody ever seen pictures or video documentaries of these migrant workers in California that pick strawberries and all this stuff? This is not good work. Okay? And the reason why you can't pay people a lot of money is how much are strawberries? How much is an apple? You'd have to have somebody pick 1,000 apples an hour to give them a decent wage. What's interesting, anybody here read Grapes of Wrath? Nobody's read Grapes of Wrath from John Steinbeck? Man, what is going on? What is going on in high schools around here? Seriously. At least watch the movie with Henry Fonda in it. That's Jane Fonda's dad. The plot of the movie was that these family from Oklahoma were being eaten up by the Dust Bowl and the Depression, so they went out to California and they couldn't make a living because they flooded the food growing regions, and the owners of the plantations go, I'll pay you 1 cent an hour I'll pay you half a cent. I don't know how you do that. I guess you cut a penny in half, but still. I mean, the ridiculousness of it. So, but some people would say, hey, it wasn't necessarily women, it was just the fact that it expanded a pool. But let me read this here with daycare. It says here, as you saw in Figure 2, today's parents, both mothers and fathers, are spending more time with their children. That was the chart on... That was the chart right there for the camera. See? The problem is, people are having less and less time at home. And the other issue is this really quality time? Most of the time, actually, studies have shown that most of the time parents are with kids. You know what they do? Watch TV. They're not sitting down, son, let me teach you how to be a man. Or even something simple like, let me show you how to fix up a fishing hook. Or, let's go down to the park and take the dog for a walk. That stuff's not going on. Somebody connect that to workaholism. A parent comes home from work, what do they feel like? Yeah, my stepdad used to just, I hope he's watching. Probably wouldn't be. He was a lump of crap on the couch for 2 days. Partly because he was just a lazy bum. And he was an alcoholic too. So that's his problem now, not mine. But anyway, good, decent people who don't drink at night come home and they're still tired. And their muscles are sore, and their brain is shot, and they still got to get up the next day and do it all over again. And not only that, they had to come home and clean the damn house. Can you understand why I don't have time for Billy? But listen to this here. Despite this trend with mothers and fathers spending so many hours away from work at home, we must ask, who's minding the kids while the parents are at work? Married couples and single mothers. Figure 3 on the next page. If you see it here, remember I told you that. This is who takes care of preschoolers while they're at work. For married couples, you essentially have relatives, including the mother cares for works 4%, including the fathers 25%. Other relatives another 5%, so that's 38%. So 47% of children in married couples are at least cared for by an adult or a relative, an adult relative. On the other hand, for single mothers, that drops pretty seriously here. So you have 23% for grandparents, 10% for other relatives, so that's 33%. Only 10% of single mothers does their child get watched by the father, especially if it's Charlie Sheen's kids. He's not even allowed to have contact with them. So 53%, so 53%. No, wait, that's 43%. So again, that's a much lower reality. It's by about 5 or 6%. But I don't think it's significant enough to say that there's anything wrong. I think one of the issues, though, becomes, and they don't really address this in the book, is what impact does it have on children that the fact is that they're watched by complete strangers, and that these strangers sort of rotate in and out. Like if you've ever seen a daycare center, there's never the same employees there for more than a few years. Seriously. And the kids change over time. And not only that, maybe one of the good things about it is that children are exposed to other children, but there's also a bad side to that because children left to their own devices with somebody just sort of supervising instead of teaching are going to potentially get into trouble. All it takes is somebody bringing some alcohol in, or hey, look at this R-rated movie on my iPad. And here's the other thing. They're not getting intensive attention from the daycare worker, are they? There's 20, 30 kids in the same room usually. The main difference is the role of the child's father while the mother is at work. For married couples, about 1 in 5 is cared for by the father, while the single mothers cared by the father drops to 1 of 10. As you can see, grandparents help fill the gap left by the absent father. Single mothers also rely more on organized daycare. Figure 3 also shows that about 1/4 or 5th, also shows that about 1 of 4 or 5 children is in daycare. Apparently, only a minority of U.S. daycare centers offer high-quality care as measured by whether they provide stimulating learning environments, safety, and emotional warmth. So if you take those two statistics, it says only apparently a minority of daycare centers prepare it this way, you're talking at least 17 to 18% of all children are in a situation where they're not getting attention from anybody. And then when the time they do spend on the weekend, have their parents yelling at them about their room being dirty, or their parents stressed about work. And again, I think time spent's not enough to understand the issue. It's what goes on during that time frame. And I'll tell you right now, you can see it when parents are driving their kids around. TV screens are like drugs way to dope your child up so you don't have to spend time or talk to it. You're talking an entire generation grew up where Hannah Montana was essentially their de facto parent. Or iCarly or something like this. Okay? I mean, kids know more about Disney and Donald Duck and Shrek than they do about their own parents, probably, on some levels. You ever got behind one of these cars where sometimes there's 2 TVs in the back of the van or something like that, right? You can sit there and watch it.
I feel like they're dangerous.
Wish I had the sound on. What?
I feel like they're dangerous because you want to start watching them.
Yeah, not only dangerous to me, but the parents, the sound is on. This is, the more noise, they've shown scientific studies, the more distractions in the car, the more dangerous it is. They've actually said that texting is as dangerous, if not more dangerous, than drinking and driving. Because at least when you're drinking and driving, unless you're actively mixing drinks in your car, you're actually looking at the road. Right? I can see somebody put a wet bar in their car. Officer would be like, "Why'd you hit that tree?" I was, daiquiri mix spilled on the ground. And then the guy I thought we killed got up in the trunk and started banging her anyway. Yeah, that's probably not a good thing to say to police. So, what's going on? Nothing but the dead body in the trunk. Thought you saw the blood. Isn't that why you pulled me over? Oh, maybe it was the coke I hid inside the dead person. Anyway. Just kidding. A primary reason for this dismal situation is the low salaries paid to daycare workers who average only about $15,000 a year. And with access to your children, does that make you feel comfortable that these people make such little amount of money? Because look, who are you attracting? Well-skilled, intelligent people? Or people who this is the only job they can come up with? I mean, you get paid more at McDonald's. $15,000 a year? I could work part-time at McDonald's and make more money than that. I could deliver pizzas 3 days a week and make twice that much. I'm serious. I only work, I work part-time in the summer and I make well more than that. Of course, I'm a lot more skilled than some. Plus, also, here's the bigger issue is, a daycare center is potentially where your child is vulnerable. Physical abuse, sexual abuse, any kind of untoward influence by other peers, right? And get away from the notion that only 5- and 6-year-olds go to daycare centers. 10, 11, 12, that's when kids start knowing. Look, I'll tell you right now, 6-year-olds know what marijuana is. They know what alcohol is. They know what being drunk is. They know what acting stupid is. Most of them have seen an R-rated movie. They know what murder is. They know what sex is. And yet they still think Santa Claus comes down the chimney. Which is just hilarious to me. So, there's actually been incidences where families who don't believe in Santa Claus, their kids will go to school and destroy the myth. They'll go to school and say, Santa Claus, to a bunch of 4-year-olds or something like that. And then the parents all get upset. Why'd you tell my kid that? Why'd you tell your kids a lie? I would say that, you can make the argument that telling kids about goofy stuff like that the Easter Bunny is real and Santa Claus is real and that superheroes are real and that Superman and all that stuff, and then lying to them about murderers and serial killers and people like Hitler. When you grow up and you realize that there's more boogeymen than Easter bunnies, and there's no such thing as the Easter bunny. I always tell people that's when you know you're really an adult, when you realize that the Easter bunny and the Santa Claus are fake and the boogeyman is real. And sometimes the boogeyman either lives in your own house or a couple of houses down. Sometimes it's your high school teacher. So, hey kids, want to come over to my house later and get drunk? It's senior day. You think teachers don't do that kind of crap? We had a rumor at our school that the art teacher was having sex with the football team. She was in her 40s. Yes, appears to be so. Bizarre. Okay, so be careful who you leave your children with. even when they're older. Okay? And frankly, when they're older, then they're conscious enough to consent to things. To like drugs and all kinds of stuff like that. And I'll tell you right now, ask any cop on the beat, the best place to get drugs is high school. Probably get the best ones too. I'll tell you right now, I'll go walk in a high school down here and with a drug sniffing dog in every third locker. The dog would stop. And not because there's sausage in there. And probably the number one drug you're going to find besides marijuana are pills. Pills all day at high school. Trust me, I studied this stuff. So again, and here's the question though to connect it, for those of you who are saying, what the hell is the connection between that? The connection between that is the parents are not spending quality time with their kids and they're around strangers all day long. There's not going to be anybody there to go, look, Billy, that's wrong. You shouldn't do that. Your friends are wrong about that. That kind of stuff. And also, when kids hit 12 and 13 and they realize that their parents haven't spending time with them, a feeling of resentment starts to set in. And that creates distance where, what the hell do you care what I'm doing, Mom? And if kids feel emotional turmoil and their friends are doing drugs, they're going to use that as a self-medicating reality. And I'm telling you right now, neglect is probably one of the number one reasons why young people start to do drugs. Not only because they don't learn the proper lessons about that drugs are dangerous, but also because they have this feeling of alienation and resentment towards their parents. And the way they medicate that and also sort of stick their middle finger up at their parents is, watch this. You didn't want me to do that? There you go. What do you think about that, Mom? Put that on YouTube, me smoking salvia and doing a line. Okay? Maybe I'll pop some pills out of your medicine cabinet. Thanks a lot, Mom, for getting that OxyContin and leaving it on the shelf. Right? Sometimes the parents do drugs with their kids. Other times, like my friend Jeff, his parents did drugs and he didn't touch them. It's like, what? Anyway. Alright, so back to what we were talking about. Remember the studies on divorce, and I'm not going to read the whole thing again, but the idea, the simple model was divorce causes social problems. The more complex model is that these things interact with one another, like abuse, neglect, poverty, poor parenting, any kind of turmoil. This is what leads to divorce. People just don't get divorced willy-nilly. That's Hollywood. That's Russell Brand and Katy Perry. Thank God, Katy, you got away from that freak. Where's your sense of taste that day when you married him? Probably wore like a lime green tuxedo too, or something stupid. Probably drunk. Probably slept with half the bride. Come on, darling. You know, Russell Brand. They just do these things. It's me. Did you see when I played Arthur in the movie Tanked? He's like Tom Green. He had about 5 minutes of fame and married a hot celebrity, and she came to her senses one day and said, "I'm hanging around with somebody who drank milk out of a cow's udder in the grocery store." Anyway. But again, also this idea, though, and you heard the arguments here that, look, it's other things besides just divorce. But we can expand the model and go, look, divorce leads into issues with children. Also, the impact on the work world. When people are divorced and stressed, it's going to make it worse at work. Plus, all these things, these demands on time, also push divorce. One of the number one reasons besides infidelity people get divorced is what? It shouldn't surprise you. This is a very American thing to get divorced over. Money issues. See, you don't even need to read a study. Some of you witness this in your own households. Right? Seriously. You know, and not just arguments about how much money do we have or do we have enough. That you went out and bought a Porsche, and that's how it's pronounced. Okay. And I wanted you to buy a Honda Accord. Or whatever, you know. You never tell me what you buy, or blah, 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 blah. All this stuff. Right? Or how much, or did you tell Billy he could have a brand new car on his 18th birthday? Because I told him he couldn't. Because it was great. That kind of stuff. Like more subtle issues with money. Also, though, here, these other problems lead into things like drug addiction, crime, suicide, all kinds of other stuff. And then, worst of all, they feed back into these, like, these people go and have kids, and then they have feedback in here again. Also, and I didn't put this on here, this stuff feeds back into the work world. And then this also feeds back into divorce. So, and here's the thing here. It's sort of like the cycle of violence. If you come from a divorced family, you're more likely to be divorced. And listen to this. This is on page 113. So what happens, what helps children adjust to divorce? Children of divorce who feel close to both parents make the best adjustment. And those who don't feel close to either parent make the worst adjustment. Number one, Alec Baldwin was caught on tape yelling at his daughter. And he was, those of you who haven't heard this, go on YouTube. He was vicious. He was talking about, I'm going to get you, and how dare you do this, and like, this crazy, psychotic stuff that would put a normal person in a mental institution for at least a few days. Okay? And you can't suspect Britney Spears has got a good relationship with her kids. I mean, they were taken away from her because she shaved her head, because she was on dope or something. And the kid's father got, and it's very rare that a man gets custody, but I don't know how a judge could sleep with herself at night that she gave kids to Kevin Federline. But it's better than giving them to Britney. And again, how do you think these kids are going to turn out, these Britney, Kevin Federline kids? Do you think they're going to turn out well? Listen to this. Other studies show that children adjust well if they experience little conflict. Feel loved, live with a parent who is making a good adjustment, and have consistent routines. It also helps if their family has adequate money to meet its needs. There's the one area where at least Kevin Federline and Britney Spears got some advantage, right? But again, can't money be a bad thing in a divorce? How does money sometimes get used if you have two wealthy parents who are trying to vie for the attention of the child? And what kind of issues does this cause later on in their life? Right. Do spoiled brats usually do well in life? And many times they're emotionally immature, they get frustrated easily, they don't want to listen to people, and then many times it doesn't matter because they're trust fund people like Paris Hilton. She had to actually go out and get a real job. Paris Hilton. I'll tell you first of all, her parents deserve the worst parents of the year award because all they had to do was make sure she wasn't a complete degenerate, and that's everything of who she is. I mean, how hard is that? You know? Thank God the son's going to run the company because the stock would have dropped yesterday. What I find funny is that Nikki's not a troublemaker, is she? She's probably a degenerate, though. She just does degenerate stuff in private, which is what most people do anyway, you know, people you wouldn't even believe. But with Paris Hilton, if she, just think if her parents would have said, you know what, when you turn 18, you got to go get a job and you got to support yourself, at least for 5 years, and then you can get your money. Do you think that might have helped her? Remember that job, or remember the TV show, It's a Simple Life or whatever? They made her go get real jobs. How did her and Nicole Richie act in those jobs? They were disrespectful. They were supposed to work at a dairy farm, and they were being sloppy, and dirt got in the milk. And then they were working for Sonic, and they were told to make onion rings, and they screwed the whole thing up. And then eventually, because they got sick of them, they made Paris wear the animals. You ever seen these suits? Where they made her do that, and then they got so hot in there. Instead of staying there and dealing with it, they went into the supermarket where there's an air conditioner, and she fell down on the ground. Look up this stuff. I mean, it was absurd. Now, part of it she was doing for the camera, but part of it is this element here. And I'll tell you right now, do Americans in general like spoiled, rotten brats, even though they voted for one in 2000 and 2004? He actually didn't win the election in 2000. Okay? Let me put it this way. In 2004, George Bush was considered to be a spoiled, rotten brat, right? Who ran against him, though, that helped him, though? That helped that sort of not... And John Kerry was looked at even more like a big, ridiculous brat. He was just a big northeastern brat, right? And he married the ketchup lady, and she'd been from Mozambique, which has a racist government. And it was like, let's see, Tweedle Brat or Tweedle Brattier? You know, I mean, what's the choice here? Brat Ultra or Brat Light? You know, take your choice. And because Bush was able to go, all shucks, I'll have a beer with you to talk about sports, people thought, well, he must be like one of us. He's got a hound dog and a shotgun in the back of his truck, just like us. Whereas John Kerry talked about windsurfing, which I'm sure is a lot of fun, but most average people don't go windsurfing because it's very expensive. What's a windsurfing board cost? Anybody know? It's got to be upwards of $2,000-$3,000, right? And on top of it, even though this is not necessarily a white-collared sport, his son played hockey. Why is that important to know? Is hockey an expensive sport to play? Even with football, with all the pads, you still don't need an ice rink. That's part of the issue with hockey, isn't it? That's why roller hockey is so much fun. Right? Let's go out there with rollerblades on and knock people down and all kinds of stuff. But let me tell you something. A cursory view of the NHL tells you that's not a high-class sport, isn't it? I mean, these people, most of them are missing teeth. Some of them can They can barely talk their own language. They can barely Ovechkin can barely speak Russian. You know, I mean, my God. He sounds like a complete idiot. He probably talks like a caveman Russian. Me want money. Tooth on ground. Put back in mouth. He's probably going to come kill me. He's too busy picking his teeth off the ground to come get me, though. Too busy picking other people's teeth out of his elbow, too. Or something like that. Anyway. Poor Ovechkin. But you know what? You got plenty of money, dude. Leave me alone. Anyway. That's a lot more women, too. So anyway, children also adjust better if a second adult can be counted on for support. Uri Bronfenbrenner says this person is like the third leg of a stool, giving stability to the smaller family unit. Any adult can be the third leg, he says, a relative, a friend, or even a former mother-in-law, but the most powerful stabilizing leg is the father, the ex-husband. As mentioned, when the children of divorce grow up and marry, they are more likely to divorce than are adults who grow up in an intact family. So there's a problem right there, right? It's a perpetual cycle. Have researchers found any factors that increase the chances that the children of divorce will have a successful marriage? Actually, they have. They are more likely to have a lasting marriage if they marry someone whose parents did not divorce. Keep this in mind when you're looking for a spouse. In these marriages, the level of trust is higher and the amount of conflict is less. If both husband and wife come from broken families, however, it is not good news. Those marriages tend to have more distrust and conflict, leading to a higher chance of divorce. And part of it has to do with expectations. That you've been around in environments where romance and family mean conflict. And the other person feels that way too. So as soon as something starts as a conflict, it turns, for lack of a better word, it turns nuclear real quick. Right? Whereas in other relationships where the person goes, you know, maybe it isn't from a divorced household, they're much more in tune with how to talk people down. Also, I think this is a general trend of divorce is so much easier to get nowadays, and marriage is not looked upon the way it used to be, like this sacred bond that you're making in front of God, and that this is breaking your bond with the other person and with God and the whole family, and you're embarrassed, and all this other stuff. Marriage is almost like, to a lot of people, like a game. See, can I marry the most attractive person? How long? Like, who was the one that married Kim Kardashian? Right. How long did that last? 72 days? Do you think they really did that with an intent that they were going to be married till they were 90 years old and have 12 kids and 14 million grandkids, and you know they repopulate part of Nevada or something? I mean, come on. You know, that's not happening. And for Chris Humphries, it was just saying that he was married to Kim Kardashian and probably having sex with her, and I guess everybody films her or something. She filmed herself. So she likes to be filmed. Her and Paris got a lot in common. You know. Anyway, but again, you know, it wasn't a relationship, and neither one of them thought it was going to last, right? I mean, you couldn't have thought that was going to happen. Same with Russell Brand and Katy Perry. I knew as soon as they got married, that was dead on arrival. I mean, I wish I could have put money on Vegas on how long that was going to last. I feel more confident about that than putting money on the Giants. Okay? And I'll tell you what, at the end of that game, weren't they up by 2? Weren't the Patriots up by 2? The line was 2.5. Those people who had bet on the Patriots were like, come on, man. You ain't to score another point. And in U.S. football, you can't score a point. That's only in Canadian football where you score a ruse by kicking the ball out of the end. I know, it's kind of weird. If none of you have ever seen Canadian football, I suggest watch it at least once. It's quite interesting. So, anyway, back to divorce. So a lot of that has to do with expectations. If you expect conflict, then conflict's going to happen. People just have like a warlike personality sometimes. They don't feel comfortable unless they're fighting with people. On top of that, Paul Amato and Jacob Cheadle in 2005 did a study on the grandchildren of people who had been divorced and found that the effects of divorce continue across generations. Using a national sample, they compared grandchildren, those whose grandparents had divorced, with those whose grandparents had not divorced. Their findings are astounding. The grandchildren of divorce have weaker ties to their parents, don't go as far in school, and don't get along well with their spouses. Here's part of the problem, though. Remember one of the issues that the other research has brought up, that it said that, look, if the people are poverty-stricken or are products of neglect or abuse, and then they get married, you already have a pre-existing issue, don't you? You have poverty. So they need to get in there and look at poverty as one of the issues too. Because poverty is a perpetuating cycle as well. You're born into poverty, many people are taught they don't go to good schools, their parents don't know how to make it in the world, they don't get good role models, they don't build any self-esteem or confidence, and then that maybe is what is one of the intervening factors that is causing the difference between grandchildren of divorce that are impacted by divorce and ones that aren't, because it wasn't a 100% equation, meaning that 100% of the grandchildren of divorce weren't acting like this. So something's stopping it for some of those people. Okay. Going on here, though, one of the further breakdowns of the family here is on page 115, the absent father and serial fatherhood, and I know probably many of you have experienced this. This was actually, if you've ever seen the movie Fight Club, you remember Edward Norton and Brad Pitt were actually in the bathroom, they were talking, and they ran this Fight Club, for those of you who have seen the movie. And they're sitting there fantasizing about who they want to fight. And Edward Norton goes to Brad Pitt, "Who'd you fight?" He's like, "I fight my dad." And Norton goes, "You didn't even know my dad. He divorced my mom when she was very young, and then he went to another city and started another family, and he did this every 6 to 7 years." And Brad Pitt shoots back, "Sounds like he's setting up franchises." And some people have suggested that this is a psychobiological characteristic of primates, that you find this with chimpanzees and gorillas and stuff, that the men, and you find this with a lot of mammals, they'll impregnate the women and leave. Lions don't stick around. And many times, what will lions and tigers do to male cubs that are their sons? Yeah, because they're competition. That's why Lion King needs to be redone. Simba wouldn't have survived, would he? Is that the name of the little baby one?
Yeah.
Right? He would have been eaten a long time. Did they hint at the fact that the father tries to eat the baby in that movie? Or that, "Son, I'm going to teach you everything and I'm going to eat you." Right? But I would say to human beings, if you're no better than other mammals and primates, what does evolution mean? You know, that we can't identify that this... Now, I don't necessarily buy this psychobiological theory, but there is some evidence that shows that primates do this kind of... Male primates do this kind of stuff. A lot of animals do. Birds do this. Okay, very few animals, believe it or not, especially mammals. Wolves, eagles, mate for life. The rest of the animals go berserk. There's no such thing as animal marriage. And some, believe it or not, dolphins and some elements of... And some monkeys, like bonobos monkeys, not only have sex with everybody, but they engage in homosexual sex on purpose. Okay, they're just this way. You know, and humans have this promiscuous attitude toward. Now, what does it look like from a sociological perspective? With divorce common on page 115, and mothers usually granted custody of the children by this idea, this cultural idea that mothers are better parents, that should tell you how bad Britney's case was in court. Because Kevin Federline was not even close to being an ideal parent or a father. And he got the kids. That should also tell you how messed up Charlie Sheen is, because they went and stole his kids. Maybe not stole is not the right word, but MIC please think of theft. Anyway, a new fathering pattern has emerged, and this pattern known as serial fatherhood, like serial killers. They just move on from one to the other. A divorced father maintains high contact with his children during the first or 2 years after the divorce. It sounds like my childhood. As the man develops a relationship with another woman, he begins to play a fathering role with the women's children and reduces contact with his own children. With another breakup, this pattern may repeat. Only about 1/6 of children who live apart from their fathers actually see their dad as often as every week. Actually, most divorced fathers stop seeing their children altogether. Apparently, for many men, fatherhood has become a short-term commitment. And if you go back to page 113, it says right here, any adult can be the third leg of support. A relative, a friend, or even a former mother-in-law, but the most powerful, stabilizing third leg is the father. What does that mean for American families if the stabilizing leg is gone? That American families are in trouble. And then on top of that, now the boss wants me at work 12 hours a day because the Chinese have people who work for 46 cents an hour, or 6 cents an hour. And all I want is to go see Billy's baseball game, and now Billy thinks that I don't care. And now when he gets 11 and 12, he's going to get pissed. Right? Maybe he'll even hate my job. He might hate the work world. This is what many times leave. I just want to be a musician, dude. I don't want to work in some place with a cubicle and suits. I'm telling you right now. I'm telling you, this is certainly, you want to talk about social trends? Families in the 1950s, even though they were married families, were very uptight. There was a lot of abuse. There was a lot of forced conformity on their kids. And their kids, when their kids grew up, they said, you know what? Screw you, Dad and Mom, with your stupid world, and your dumb commuting, and your stupid cubicles, and your crappy jobs. I'm going to go out in the middle of Montana and live with a bunch of my friends. We're just going to share everything and sing and do paintings and stuff. And the parents are like, what? Like, you're not my child anymore. I hope they draft you into Vietnam. And the kids were like, oh, that's it. We're going to protest against Vietnam and everything else you stand for. I'm telling you, it caused a generation gap. This potentially could cause alienation, anime, a whole host of other things. So, anyway, all right. With the 10 minutes that we have left, though, I want to go back and talk about how potentially the work world makes this worse. So listen to this. This is from the waiting window on page 12. Talking about a woman named Gwen who works at Amerco. It says here, this is on page 12, Gwen loves her job at Amerco and she's very good at it. So she feels rewarded, and that's part of the reason you have a job, is to feel a sense of purpose. Whatever the daily pressure, she also feels remarkably at home there. This is part of the title of the book. Her boss, a man who says she reminds her of the best aspects of her father, a man who says she reminds, anyway, helps her deal with her work problems and strongly supports her desire to rise in the company. So if this, remember we just talked about serial fatherhood, so one of the reasons why Hochschild found out that some people view work like home is not only the disgust that they have towards their home life, which is, if you see, is falling apart, but also if they grew up without a father, all of a sudden this boss comes in and says, hey, how you doing? Great job. Have a conversation with you. Hey, what are you doing this weekend? Want to go to the company picnic? All this stuff. How's your kids? How's your life? Hey, you having any trouble? I'll help you do it. I've had bosses like this. They were like mothers to me. I remember one time I was in between apartments. She found me in an apartment. You know? If she knew something was going on, she'd bring me in and go tell me what's wrong. And say stuff that your mother would say. Don't lie to me about this. I know you feel bad. Or something like that, right? That like there's these fatherly figures. And the good thing is that because it's pay and it's supposed to be a professional environment, they can't push it too far, right? You get all the positives of a father and a mother, but they can't sit there and go, you scumbag, I'm going to disown you. How dare you say that, blah, blah, blah. Now they can admonish you, but it's still within this reasonable range. That even if you get fired at work, unless you're grossly incompetent and you insulted your bosses, they still try to be nice about it. The family, on the other hand, can be disgustingly cruel, can't they? Mean and nasty. I told you this before. People commit suicide during Christmas. Interestingly enough, not during Thanksgiving, because what is there to commit suicide about Thanksgiving? Food and football? And sitting around? There ain't no presents and no Christmas tree and somebody going, oh, tube socks? I didn't want tube socks. Is there an iPad in the tube socks? You know? Or I gotta give Dad something, or he'll get mad at me, that kind of stuff. So, anyway. Somebody needs to investigate this suicide Christmas thing. It's not good. It's not good. I mean, it's bad enough it's all about Santa Claus and elves and stupid stuff that doesn't exist. And if you look at Santa Claus, it appears to me he's running a sweatshop. Because he doesn't pay his employees. He dopes up reindeers. You know? All these elves are like stunted in their growth, so they're not feeding them right, paying them properly. I mean, my God, Santa, you're under investigation by the Department of Labor, man. We just shut you down a long time ago. At least in Chinese factories, they pay people. That's why Chinese people probably don't believe in Santa Claus. They've seen this stuff. Anyway. In many ways, her Amerco dad has been better to her than her own father, who, when she was small, abruptly walked out on her mother and her. She feels lucky to have such a caring boss, and working for him has reinforced her desire to give her all to work insofar as she can. So for her, is this just about putting in hours and getting paid? No, she feels obligated. And here, this is one of the tricks, and we'll talk about this organizational culture. One of the things that corporations have been doing, and they talk about this in the book about humanizing culture, one of the things that corporations have been doing is trying to create a situation where they want to use the loyalty bonds and the intimacy of family inside the workplace so they can get you and play guilt games on you. You're 6 months pregnant, you come in and tell your boss, hey, remember I told you I was going to take 3 months off unpaid in the United States, maternity leave, and the boss goes, yeah, you know, Ellen, I know that you want to leave, and I know that you have every right to, and you applied for it properly, but if there's any way you could just stay for 1 more month, or just a couple weeks, we really need you here. I mean, look, this is your family too. Go out there on the floor and look at all those people who depend upon you. They want you here, I want you here. Okay? We're going to miss you. That type of language is family language, isn't it? We're going to miss you. We need you here. You're an important part of this organization. I've heard people say that to their family. You're an important part of this organization, Mom. We need to keep you happy. How would you like a health care plan? Maybe a pension. You can have a company picnic for the family. And again, families have also started to act like work. Putting written rules up on the board. Making things punishments. I remember at one point we got to a point in our family where we had to have a family court. Right, like a dispute resolution process, right? Which is what they do at work. She and her husband needed her salary, she tells me, since his job, though more lucrative than hers, is less steady. Gradually, over the 3 years, Gwen's workday has grown longer. She used it to work a straight 8-hour day. Now it is regularly 8.5 to 9 hours, not counting the work that often spills over into life at home. Gwen is not happy about this. She feels Cassie's 10-hour day at Spotted Deer is too long. She leaves her child at this daycare center for 10 hours. That ain't some little thing. That doesn't... Hey, writers of the book, put that statistic in your book. You can't tell me that that doesn't disrupt the child's upbringing. Spend 10 hours with people they don't know. Away from their parents. Thinking that their parents just abandoned them. But at the same time, she's not putting energy into curbing her expanding workday. Maybe being a mother is hard work, and you don't get paid. What she does do is complain about it, joke about it, compare stories with friends at work. It becomes almost like a badge of honor how much work that people do. Hers are not the boastful war stories of the older men in Americo who proudly proclaim their 10-hour workdays and bi-weekly company travel schedules. Rather, Gwen's stories are more like situation comedies. It's not funny to the kids. I don't know situation comedies where people end up alienated, hating their parents, and addicted to drugs by the time they're 22. Okay, that's not a good sitcom. Okay, maybe it's Three's Company or something on acid or something. I don't know. The new Three's Company. Although there is a show on FX called Unsupervised. It's a cartoon that's like that. I remember I saw the preview. I was like, I gotta watch this. When I watched it, and I was like, my God, what is this? It makes Beavis and Butthead blush. Okay. And then people were involved in playing baseball with a frog and all kinds of things like that. Anyway. Rather, Gwen's stories, blah, blah, about forgetting to shop and coming home to a refrigerator containing little more than wilted lettuce and a jar of olives. Stories told in the spirit of hopeless amusement. Gwen is reasonably well informed about Americo's flex time and reduced hours policy, which are available to white-collar employees like her, but she has not talked with her boss about cutting back her hours, nor have her joking coworkers or her boss hasn't raised the possibility himself. There's just so much to get done at the office, and remember, she feels positive about this. Now, listen to this, and I think this is probably the last thing we'll talk about today. This is on page 18 and 19. Starting on page 18, first full paragraph, it says the most important effect of total quality, this is a program that Americo put into effect, was to create a shared culture made up of new values and practice. So one of the things they were trying to do was change the culture, to make people more willing to take flex time or to share their value systems with other people, to create a professional workplace, but a very happy workplace, a workplace where people's rights were respected. But was it just a trick, right? Was it just a surface level reality, right? Like the government. They say that, like the Constitution says, of, for, and by the people. Is that actually the way the federal bureaucracy? Does the Federal Reserve Chairman ask your opinion? No. So let's be realistic. They didn't ask my opinion last time they attacked a rock. They just did it. And if they want to send you off to the middle of nowhere, you don't have any voice in it anyway. To a company outsider, a culture is something that you live in, not something you engineer. Remember the definition of the corporate culture. But within the company, people readily spoke of engineering culture. They spoke of having values and of nearly the same breadth of managing them. Some even talked about company culture as if it could be bought and sold. Pat O'Malley, chief of the Division of Education and Training, remarked proudly, "It takes 8 years for another company to imitate our changes in corporate culture. It's not something they can steal. It's good for 8 years." You hear the competition in his voice. To imagine that one manages values, one's own or those of other people, is itself a fundamental part of company culture. Layer after layer of thin culture was thus poured on from the top. Remember, one of the things, that culture comes from the top, like the culture of the New York Giants. If you're late for a meeting, you're in trouble. At the Jets, ain't so much. Okay, as long as you bring in some dirty socks or something for Rex so you can smell them. You heard what I said, Rex. What are you going to do about it? You're a foot-sniffing weirdo. Okay, and you're turning out to be, seems to me, a bad coach with a big mouth. Hey, I like the Jets. I'm just trying to be honest. I'm trying to help you, Rex. We believe in diversity. We believe in valuing the individual. We believe in delighting the customer and smelling feet. The CEO would enunciate new shifts or reaffirm old themes in company culture to finally craft its speeches received with great seriousness. The higher up in the company or the closer to the headquarters they were, the more attuned employees were in the shifts in company culture. Employees at the upper levels took the ideas home with them, mulled them over, and decided if and how much they agreed or disagreed with them. Everyone was free to disagree with the CEO's speech, but the messages in the speech were bandied about. They were in the air. They felt like a good thing to believe in. Often a message such as valuing the individual or honoring diversity seemed moral, unifying, and agreeable. One day, reading the returns from a company survey on attitudes toward gender and ethnic diversity, I noticed a statement on the front cover of the questionnaire. It is Amoco's policy to value diversity. The questionnaire asked people what they thought, but it also told people what the company would like them to think. So with corporate culture, this is my last point here, there's a give and take where the company tries to act like you have a choice in this, but they don't. But in reality, the employees get around the corporate culture because their immediate bosses allow them to skate through these things. We'll talk more about what corporate culture is and means for how an institution acts on an everyday manner. All right, everybody. Sorry I went over there.